Hi, and welcome back to this Wednesday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. We tweeted out that segment where I talked about men being designed by God to be the breadwinners, and I'm looking at some of the Twitter replies. Let me just give you some example of the YouTube replies. Here's one, says, talking out your boop again, I see. Where is your proof of claim? Well, that would be Genesis 1, 2, and 3. Here's one from a Jacqueline somebody. The 50s called. They think the statement is asinine too, that God designed men, not women, to be breadwinners. Here's one says, I'm pretty sure you can ignore the rest of the sentence when the first two words are, quote, God designed, end quote. Here's another tweeter. My eye roll can be seen from space. That was their response to my comment that God designed men, not women, to be breadwinners. Here's a woman who tweets in response, man designed God to be a misogynist. Here's another one, just wants me to die and go away. Boomers can't die and rid the planet of themselves fast enough. And it just kind of goes on from there. So that is out there in the Twitterverse. I knew that was going to generate a blizzard of negative reaction, and I could care less because it is the truth. Couple of other quick items. We'll get to some sound bites and more phone calls here. Remember this whole deal about the IRS coming down on these 501c4 organizations. These Tea Party groups were 501c4. James Dobson wanted to do a 501c4 because they're allowed a little more political activity than a 501c3. So a lot of organizations, AFA is exactly the same. We've got a 501c3 and we have a 501c4. There's a little more latitude for the 501c4 to be involved in political activity. And that's what the IRS was trying to hammer. They were hammering the 501c4s. Now, they went after some C3s, but the reason that they threw obstacle after obstacle in James Dobson's way is he wanted to establish a 501c4 to allow him a little bit more political activism. Now, the difference between a C3, which is a charity and educational purpose, and a C4 is that donations to a 501c3 are tax deductible. You can take a write-off on your tax return if you itemize. For a 501c4. It's tax exempt. The organization itself doesn't pay taxes, but you can't claim a deduction for it, and that's in part because it's more political. But they were saying this is inexcusable. These Tea Party folks are using these C4, and all they want to do is campaign for Republican candidates. We've got to stop it. Well, here today, President Obama sent out a fundraiser. He's the president of the United States. He's the leader of the Democratic Party, and he sends a fundraising email out for the Organizing for Action 501c4. Supposed to be a nonpartisan group, and he's out there as the leading Democrat in the country raising money for this 501c4 while his IRS is trying to keep other people's 501c4s even from getting off the ground. Harry Reid out there saying that the GOP ought to purge the Tea Party. I just love it when we get advice from Democrats on what the Republican Party ought to do. They're just full of advice. We're so concerned about the Republican Party. We care so deeply about the Republican Party. We care about its fortunes. We care about its future. We want only the best for the Republican Party. And Harry Reid saying, look, I care about you guys, you Republicans. If you guys want to have a future, you got to get rid of that cotton picking Tea Party. They are jeopardizing your future. Don't you just love it when they ooze such concern? And I'll tell you what that tells you. That tells you that the Tea Party is a worse nightmare that the Democrats have. If Harry Reid's out there talking about we got to get rid of the Tea Party, what does it mean? They're a threat to him and to his agenda. Don't worry about things in D.C., by the way. The unemployment rate is down to 5.0% in the Washington area. So they're doing absolutely just fine. Remember, 7 of the 10 richest counties in America right there in the Washington, D.C. area. So don't shed any tears for the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. There are a record number of people on disability right now, 10,978,000 people on disability, almost 11 million people on disability. It tends to be permanent. Nobody hardly ever goes off disability any longer. Once they're on for good. The average age now for signing up for Social Security disability is 49. They never come off of it. They go right up to 65, 66, start collecting Social Security. They're on the public dole from age 49 till the day that they die. And that number is growing exponentially, the number of people that are on the public dole. And a lot of these diagnoses are for things like mental stress, emotional incapacity, lower back pain that can't be it can't be quantified. It can't be verified. It's just somebody says, I just got a lot of pain in my back and I can't work. Okay, you go on Social Security disability. It's 196th straight month that Social Security disability payments have increased. And listen to this. This is another one of these unsustainable government programs. In 1968, there were 51 full-time workers for every worker that was collecting disability. In May of 2013, right now, there are only 13 Americans working for every worker on disability. There are so many people collecting disability right now in America that they would be the 8th largest state in the union. If you put all of the people collecting disability in one state, they would be the 8th largest state in the union. There are more people collecting disability than there are people who live in Georgia or Michigan or North Carolina or New Jersey or even in Virginia. And back to the IRS thing, we now have evidence, NBC saying, look, we know now as a matter of fact that the pressure to audit these conservative groups came not just from the Cincinnati office, but it came from top people in the IRS. This is Lisa Myers, NBC. This is not a conservative outlet. Additional scrutiny of conservative organizations' activities by the IRS did not solely originate in the agency's Cincinnati office, with requests for information coming from other offices and often bearing the signatures of higher-ups at the agency, according to attorneys representing some of the targeted groups, mainly Jay Sekulow, ACLJ. They're representing 27 of these conservative groups, and they are going to take the IRS to court. They are going to take them to the cleaners. At least one of these letters came from Lois Lerner herself. She's the one that's now been suspended. She was the head of the Exempt Organizations Department in Washington. And I'll tell you who is afraid of Lois Lerner right now. Now, she's on paid administrative leave, this paid vacation. The conservative groups don't have to worry about her because she's on the sidelines. I'll tell you who is panicked is it's the poobahs in Washington, D.C. that were complicit with her in this, who gave her instructions to do this, who enabled her to do this, who had guilty knowledge of this. They're the ones that are spooked now because they tried to fire her, and she said, I'm not going anywhere. I won't let you fire me. You're going to have to go through the whole process. I'm not going to quit. And to go through the process of firing a federal employee is just amazing, the hoops you got to jump through, the time it takes, the appeals that they can exercise. It takes well over a year minimum to fire a federal employee that wants to exercise all their rights of appeal. So they tried to fire her, and she wouldn't let them, which means she's not going to go quietly and gently into that good night. And she knows where the bodies are buried, and she knows who buried them. So I think a lot of people in D.C. got to be spooked to death right now of Lois Lerner. And speaking of Eric Holder and his trampling on the First Amendment freedom of the press, here's Jonathan Turley. This guy's a hardcore left-wing lawyer. Jonathan Turley, if you're familiar with the name, he's just an uber leftist, and he's now calling for Eric Holder to be fired because he's responsible for the greatest attack on the free press in decades. So even liberal attorneys now are turning on Eric Holder. Let's go back to the phones, 888-589-8840. Let's go to Toby, Little Rock, Arkansas. Toby, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hey, thank you, Brian. You had mentioned Gog and Magog from the book of Ezekiel earlier in the program. I just wanted to make a couple of comments on that. Most evangelical Bible scholars do indeed agree that those Gog and Magog is the ancestral names of the people that settled in Russia.
Uh-huh.
Also, most Orthodox Jewish rabbis agree that that is the ancestral names for the people that settled in Russia. Now, bringing this up to date with the Vladimir Putin and the modern-day Russian regime, we need to keep in mind that the Russian regime, does not intend to be a part of this new world order system that is being set up by the Anglo-American banking international bankers. And many prophetically gifted people such as David Wilkerson, Leonard Ravenhill, David Reagan in times past have foreseen a time that Russia would make a move against the United States prior to moving against Israel in the Middle East. The primary move, the reason for the move against the Middle East will be that Russia intends to cut off the oil supply to Europe. So you have the United States out of the way as a superpower. You now cut off the oil supply to Europe, who is totally dependent on Middle Eastern oil. Russia is in a position to blackmail Europe. But, of course, as the book of Ezekiel describes, God will intervene in this situation, and the horde of Gog and Magog will be wiped out on the mountains of Israel. Of course, this is all a lot of doom and gloom, but it is Bible prophecy. The good news is that Jesus is still on the throne, and we are in the beginning phases of a revival here in Little Rock and other places across the country that I believe will sweep in multitudes into the kingdom of God. Brian, I appreciate your program, and God bless you.
All right. Well, thank you for the call. I appreciate that, Toby. And again, it's interesting. The thing that's a hitch for me, and I understand people wanting to figure out where the U.S. fits in all this, and I understand all of that. But I think this fulfillment of prophecy is a very fluid thing. And one of the things I haven't heard somebody adequately explain, because of course, the tendency is irresistible to try to see how prophecy is being fulfilled in our own day. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be looking for those parallels. I think we always should be looking for that, because we know that the return of Christ is imminent, could happen suddenly without warning while we're just off doing our thing and maybe not even paying attention to that. The Lord could come because he's going to come without warning. And so I think we always ought to be looking for scenarios that fit the biblical pattern of prophecy. But the one hitch I've got with the Gog and Magog thing is that the attack is going to come on Israel at a time where they are dwelling securely. They are dwelling in safety. And I'm not sure anybody could say that about Israel right now, or even say that about Israel in the foreseeable future. They're surrounded by hostile nations. Hard for me to see a time coming when they are going to be dwelling in peace and dwelling in security. Anyway, more food for thought. Appreciate the call, Toby. Thank you for that. Focal Point AFR Talk, back in 2.